In the previous session, we understood the concept of unit imaginary numbers I. It is the square root of negative 1. If we square it, we get root of negative 1 times root of negative 1, which equals negative 1. The square of unit imaginary number is negative 1. Let us now try to work out more powers of I. What will be I cube then? I cube is I times I times I, and we can write it as I squared times I. Now I squared is equal to negative 1, so the value of I cube is negative I. Similarly, we can find out the fourth power of I. The fourth power of I can be written as I squared times I squared, which gives us negative 1 times negative 1, and we already know that negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. Hence, the fourth power of I is just 1. So I squared is negative 1, I cube is negative I, and fourth power of I is 1. Similarly, we can work out further powers of I, like fifth power, sixth power, seventh power, eighth power, and ninth power. This is what we would get. Notice the cyclic pattern in the powers of I, negative 1, negative I, and then 1 again. This is one way in which we can understand the first power, the second power, the third power, the fourth power of I, and then repeat fifth power, sixth power, seventh power, eighth power, and this will go on. So what is I? It is just a unit imaginary number and is equal to square root of negative 1. What does the word unit means? Let us look at an example. What will the square root of negative 5 be equal to? If we try it out on a normal calculator, it would say that the input is invalid. That's because the most calculators are not programmed to use imaginary numbers. So how do we understand it? The square root of negative 5. It can be written as square root of 5 times negative 1. And we know a property of exponents, which says that square root of a times b is equal to square root of a times square root of b. Similarly, this can be written as square root of 5 times square root of negative 1. So, the square root of negative 1 is I, and hence we get square root of 5 times I. And this is also an imaginary number. But it's not a unit imaginary number, as it is root 5 times I. But unit imaginary number is 1 times I, and hence it is called a unit imaginary number. Basically, any real number times I is an imaginary number. For instance, this is how we would write the square root of negative 169 over 144. We get 13 over 12 times I. It's a real number times I. So, numbers like 145i, 25i, 0.33i, 1.36i are also imaginary number. An imaginary number is simply b times I, where b is any real number denoted by rez and I is imaginary number denoted by imz. In short, we can say that imaginary numbers are not real numbers. They cannot be plotted on a real number line, but they are real in the sense that they exist in mathematics and are used widely in various applications. What kind of application? We will see that next.